Hi, welcome once again to yet another astrology web clip. Today we're going to talk about eclipses. So I want to talk about what is an eclipse? What is the importance of an eclipse? Why would we even look at eclipses? So as the first part of my conversation with you today, I want to talk about what is an eclipse. So we already know that a solar eclipse is when the sun is blocked out by the moon. So with that said, let's talk about the fact that that happens twice a year. And then each solar eclipse is followed by a subsequent lunar eclipse that happens at the full moon. So a solar eclipse always happens at a new moon, and a lunar eclipse always happens at a full moon. So we're going to start with just that basic. Now, this particular lunar eclipse that I want to talk about today is happening July 16th, 2019. Okay, I'm going to use an example of it for predictive, but the date's not really important. It's the material about the eclipse that I really want to discuss with you today. Okay, so the reason why this particular lunar eclipse is called a partial has to do with the moon's orbits to its nodes. And with that said, when I found that out, I had actually to look it up. When I realized that, it makes sense from an astrology perspective, because the nodes are so important in the actual chart itself that's a whole conversation for another day. That's going to be a whole other web clip, is the study of the nodes and what they represent. So the moon's nodes are important not just to us as astrologers, but obviously they're important to what kind of lunar eclipse we're having. Okay, so we're talking about a partial here. Okay, so we know that an eclipse happens 2 times for a solar, 2 times for a lunar, and they happen together. They're subsequent, they come together. Okay, so we already know that. So now let's look at them in astrology. So we got the science. In astrology, the reason why eclipses are so interesting is their long duration of development. They actually, when you're going to look at an eclipse, you want to look at the effects of an eclipse 12 weeks before it happens, because you're already working on it till the hit. Okay, I think that's really interesting because that's how we work natally. Now, let's talk about what eclipses meant to the old society. In the old society, when the world was flat, when they didn't really know as much, but they still had astronomy and astrologers, they were still following what was going on in the skies, they were terrified of these solar eclipses, if you will, okay? Because they seem to coincide, and you could probably check this out today, but they tend to coincide with big societal events, famines, wars, disasters. I think that you could probably still find that to be true today, because wherever that eclipse line is, wherever it takes place, generally it is the beginning of some kind of monumental change on some level. And because they're eclipses, they are like lessons. We are evolving through them. They are a maturing factor, if you will. Even for the world, we evolve through them. But like every other lesson in the human condition, it comes like a 2x4 to the back of the head sometimes, because that's the way we learn. So that would make a lot of sense when you look at how they saw them back in the old days. They were very superstitious. They really saw them as the beginning of some difficult times. I'm not saying they're not. I'm just saying that we understand a lot more now. We also know that we do this twice a year. It just doesn't happen in the same place. So we know a lot more now. We also know they're about maturing. They're about evolving and developing. So there is a reason why the eclipse. It is a lot about the reflective energy of the sun moon. So the moon is a reflective energy to the sun. It really does get a person to reflect. It is a reflection concept. If you've been up to bad things, then it's very likely the shoe could drop, and that will happen. If we get complacent in life, if we start to take things for granted, the shoe's going to drop. let's welcome to the human condition. So the eclipse is one of many tools that we have through which we grow and we evolve and we become better people, hopefully. So we've been doing a lot of evolving through the years. So there is a real impact on all of us when there is an eclipse. Okay. So I want to go back to the basics. So I decided to kind of look this up because I wanted to get some information for the article that I was writing. I also wanted to get some information for this web clip since I coincide them on my website. They're together. So if you want to check it out, you want to read more, if you're watching on YouTube, you want to check the website out, divinationcounselingservice.org. So I'm a big proponent of the old stuff. I've been doing astrology for over 50 years, so I'm really curious about the stuff written in 1910, 1912, when astrology was coming into its heyday, if you will, especially in certain parts of the world. So astrology, according to Llewellyn and George, is the astrology on it is that the new moon is more important than the full moon, and that the full moon doesn't have the same impact, so that lunar eclipse wouldn't have the impact that the solar does. That's his theory. I'm not going to discount that. I'm a new moon astrologer. I actually post articles on both my website and I send out a newsletter where I do a predictive article every month on the new moon. That's what I base. It's sun sign based astrology, but what I use to base my information where I'm coming from is the new moon chart. So I definitely agree. However, I had a little revelation today that I want to also discuss, which I thought was really wild and wonderful. And I want to share it with you because it just shows how exciting astrology is. Okay. So we know that the new moon is very, very important. So, of course, the solar eclipse would have more significance. I know that because I write articles on that. But I also want to point out that the full moon has its value. I want to point out that if you ever talk to somebody who works in an emergency room, they always know when it's a full moon. When you work in a bar, you might notice the full moon because people tend to overdrink. They tend to end up more in emergency rooms. They say that people bleed more during surgery. So the full moon definitely has an effect on us. I think the effect is subtler because it's more of a mental emotional, but it's still there. It is still a part of us. And maybe that's the difference. Maybe as we've evolved through the years, we are becoming more aware. And maybe we are more sensitive as a result. Thus, the lunar eclipse would have a stronger effect. So I definitely want to point that out right now, that if you were somebody who wanted to experiment with astrology, don't wait for a new moon. If you want to play with the full moon, go ahead. If you want to play with if you feel that the full moon eclipse, if the lunar eclipse was a much stronger hit for you than the actual solar eclipse, then by all means, I would use the lunar eclipse chart. I don't think that it's any less valid. I think that's where modern astrologers are a little bit different than the old time astrologers. Okay. So what I want to do now is I want to give you a little example of something that happened when I was doing this research. Okay. So we talked a little bit about the eclipses and the time period that it takes. It takes 12 weeks that you're working up to the eclipse before the actual hit takes place. You're actually working on the eclipses for a long time. We all are. I guess that in a way that makes them great for predictive work, but it also makes it a little hard commercially to sell people on reading eclipse charts unless they were astrologers. Okay. So one of the things I did with this eclipse chart was I decided to take a planet and just look at the planet. And the reason why is because I want to talk about another predictive technique that we can use as astrologers, which is to look at the eclipse, to make a note, to write down where the planets are. And then when the moon comes to those spots, see what's going on. Maybe nothing, but maybe something. And a lot of times something. applies, because the moon is going to hit every point every month. So even after the eclipse for a month or two, you might want to look at the point of whatever planet that you happen to be following. It's a great way to study astrology. It's a lot of aha moments, I can assure you. So I decided that in order to make my point and to create the example that I wanted to create, that I was going to use the Mars at 9 degrees 29 minutes of Leo as the planet. That I was going to say, hey, look, this is where this planet is in this eclipse chart. And here's, this is also going to be hit with this moon coming up next month. So in other words, there's going to be another hit on this Mars every month when our Capricorn moon on the 16th gets to Leo. Not that far away, okay? About a week or two. It'd be interesting to see what happens. And that was my point. But when I saw that, I also realized that I'm working on a chart where that 929 was really important in that fixed position, because I actually know somebody who's been taking computer courses. It actually equals the Uranus of this chart. It's actually this person's Uranus. It's like, oh my God. And they've been taking computer classes to develop a website to relate to their work. And everything that just quoted everything about this Uranus and how it's placed in this chart, that it does have to do with the work. It is a 6th house Uranus, yada, yada. So it really kind of was a wonderful example of like, oh my God, this person is actively working Mars. This is where their action is taking place. And this is what they're doing. Okay, so I thought, wow, that's weird. So let me look at the actual 24/4 cardinal axis. So I went over, and I didn't even have to go very far. And believe me when I tell you, this axis was just, wow, filled with detail. But I don't want to confuse everybody, so I'm going to keep this really simple. So I go to 24/04 cardinal, and it equals Adamitas Juno, which means specialized work. So of course I'm laughing. I'm saying to myself, oh my God, that's exactly why, right? The computer courses are related to this person's work. This tells you that. And it's about the future, their career. Midheaven, it equals the midheaven in this thing. So I just kind of got blown away, because I wanted to point out that as a modern day astrologer, the fact is that all things are relevant in astrology, and that some great astrologers can make some incredible finds working in the most unique ways. There are no right or wrongs. Yes, new moons are important. I'm not discounting Mr. George. There's no way. He's right. I write based on that. But where I think he might be underestimating the work is in the area of the lunar. I guess because we're more evolved. I don't know. But I can tell you that it really does work that way. And I was completely awed by it. So welcome to the fun of astrology. And it is so much fun to play. And I hope that this inspired somebody out there to go into an eclipse chart. It can be any eclipse chart. You can study history in eclipse charts. It's eclipse charts. That's a whole minefield of information. And I really do hope that you take me up on that offer. In the interim, if you have any questions or concerns, if you need astrology done for yourself, for medical, for counseling, work, or for your relationships, personal life, contact me, divinationcounselingservice.org. Until then, I'll catch you on the next web clip. Happy astrology.